crux of the matter. Friends, the situation in Bangladesh is very fluid, and that fluidity is making it unpredictable and also one of concern. The death of an Islamist radical leader who had the opportunity to grow within the political ecosystem and emerge even perhaps as a contender for leadership roles in Bangladesh has led to an orgy of violence. Islamized mobs, supporters of this particular leader, are out on the streets and they are targeting, in fact, even lynching supporters of the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, the extended ecosystem, moderates in the media, those that are opposed to them ideologically, including the Indian high commissions that are dotted across the country. And there has also been a disturbing attack on minority Hindu community in which one Hindu has been lynched at the stake, and I am being quite literal here. Those pictures are dramatic, and it appears that this cycle of violence is not going to abate anytime soon. Various people have tried to explain what is actually going on in Bangladesh. We've been speaking to some of our sources in Bangladesh, and they believe that this violence is engineered and orchestrated. Why? Because the head of the interim administration, Mr. Muhammad Yunus, doesn't want to be ejected from power and is therefore trying to delay the elections which are scheduled for early next year. If he can build a case that the country is racked by destabilizing violence, he can make a case to postpone the elections and perpetuate his rule. Is that really what is happening? What is also behind the Islamization of Bangladesh polity? And why is it taking on such an anti-India hue? To discuss this, I am joined by Mr. Muhammad A. Arafat, former Minister of Bangladesh and close aide of Sheikh Hasina. Let me first bring you in, Mr. Arafat, and let me ask you, what do you think is the reason why we're seeing this absolute situation in Bangladesh erupt into this fireball of violence?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your question. So to answer your question, we have to go back to 2024, August 5th. Actually, many people misread what happened in July, August. We were very much inside in the situation, and we exactly saw what happened. And somehow, the real picture never got revealed globally through media or any other means, unfortunately. That was a full-scale insurgency that happened against our legally established government. And it was backed by all these radical Islamists and all these descendants of the collaborators of 1971, those who believe in this pro-Pakistani views in Bangladesh. And therefore, they wanted to oust. It has nothing to do with Awami League's rule and its the lack of the kind of portrayal they want to give it, the lack of democracy, lack of good elections, and lack of human rights and all that. All those things has nothing to do with any of this. It was all because they consider Awami League as the arch rival, because Awami League is a pro-liberation political party. Awami League wants to see Bangladesh as a secular country and a secular society. And these people never wanted the independence. Their predecessor, their ancestor, they never wanted it. They collaborated with Pakistani army, and when they were defeated, because India helped us into this process, therefore India, they want to consider as their top enemy. So Awami League's point of view to the diplomatic relationship with India was very positive. We wanted to see it in a very positive lens, which is through the cooperation and collaboration, we will resolve our problems and we will go beyond and try to create an ecosystem where the people of both the countries will be benefited. And that exactly what we were doing. We resolved the land boundary issues through the land boundary agreement. We resolved the maritime boundary issues on those things, many countries fought for years. But look at Bangladesh and India under the leadership of Sheikh Hasina. We resolved all those matters in a very friendly manner through discussions. So therefore, this descendant of the collaborators of Pakistani army of this generation, they hate India. That's why. So they not only consider Awami League as the enemy, they consider India as the enemy, or anything that upholds the secular values or a progressive Bangladesh. They think they are the enemy of their politics. That's why they attack the Chaya Knot. It's a cultural institution, right? What does it have to do with? It's not even media or political party. They attack Chaya Knot because they don't like even the cultural practices that reflects the Bengali culture and our traditions and our history. So they have opposition to anything and everything. You know, Begum Rokeya Sakhat Hussain, she's an iconic figure for the women liberation in Bangladesh. So what they did after 5th August, wherever they found any of her portrait, they disfigured her portrait with some cursing words and all that. So you can see it's a clear pattern, a clear trend. None of these are isolated. What Yunus has done into this, what he has done, he has justified all of these mob violences in the beginning, right from the beginning, right? And whenever there was an attack on the Hindi community, on the minority community, it's not only Hindi community, the Christians were attacked, even the sects in the Islam, Muslims itself, like the shrines were attacked, the Ahmadiyya communities were attacked, and Yunus always said, oh no, they were not attacked because of their religious identity, they were attacked because they are Awami League supporters. That's the kind of thing he said, even to his interviews to the Indian media. So this is how Yunus is the one who actually paved the way right from the beginning to come to this situation. He is solely responsible for that. He consistently made excuses for these mob violences whenever it suits his agenda. He did not stop the demolishing of the Bangabandhu's residence at Road 32. Nor did he later brought any of the perpetrators to book. He was just enjoying the fact it went live on Bangladesh different televisions. Nobody protested it. So naturally, this is how it is unfolding in Bangladesh, what you can see now today.
So I want to ask you, how did this Islamist undercurrent or these Islamist undercurrents go unnoticed for so long? Were they always there? And was it that Sheikh Hasina had managed to sort of contain them because her worldview was different? We were always given to believe that Muhammad Yunus was a leader that favored reform. He was close to Washington and was therefore a progressive.
So this is the thing here. Sometimes that's what some of the Western countries, they make mistake. They want to impose some people from the top. They think those individuals are progressive and secular and all that. But they forget those people do not have any political mandate or a strong political organizations which is rooted to the grassroots in the country. So without the strong platform, it is not possible to contain these kind of things. Why Sheikh Hasina could do it? Because Awami League is the only political party. It was an indigenous force which would believe in the secular values, and Awami League is the only deterrent against the rise of this, pro-Pakistani and radical Islamist elements. If you just want to just install some people like Yunus from the top, who has no political organization whatsoever, then naturally Yunus started getting dependent on this radical Islamist force. These are the people who you saw last night, attacking Pratham Aalo and Daily Star, are basically the Yunus's henchmen. Yunus derived his power from these people to sustain in his
okay.
Yeah. So what the individual believes in really doesn't matter. So no, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. We had a bit of an audio glitch there, but go ahead, please. You were making a point. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, what Yunus is doing, what the image that he has created globally, he's acting exactly opposite to that. He used to lecture on the country, the entire nation. He used to lecture on freedom of media. He used to lecture on the freedom of speech. He used to lecture on the rule of law. He used to lecture on the reforms. Has anything happened? Nothing happened. He's made everything a complete joke out of everything. Even the election that he's going ahead with, he has banned Awami League, one of the two major parties. If you banned it and excluding it from the electoral process, how can you even call that an election, let alone free and fair? It's going to be a selection.
So how did
India?
Yes.
No, go ahead, please.
No, so we're seeing obviously a situation develop now where these Islamist forces seem to be dictating the agenda because they're quite, I mean, you can see them. They're out on the streets, they're running amok. What puts the genie back in the bottle? And can it be put back in the bottle?
See, the only way to solve this is to take the country through a peaceful democratic transition. And that is possible only through, in a true sense, a free and fair and inclusive election. Something that Yunus is completely free to do it. So I think another option is to get another government. Now we have the caretaker government installed into the constitution again. So if there is a constitutionally formed caretaker government, and if that government take up the responsibility to hold a free and fair and inclusive election, and through this process, the people of the country get the chance to vote its government, then only it is possible. And we need a leader like Sheikh Hasina.
No, now so can we assume, because this is an important point that you're making, can you assume that the majority of the people still have a secular, tolerant outlook and they won't elect, even in a free election, won't elect this Islamist rabble into power?
Yes, absolutely. Majority of the people of Bangladesh is absolutely in favor of a peaceful society. They do not support this kind of insurgency and this kind of activities. These are the people. They are not the majority of the people. There are some group of people, but the rest of the people are like, they don't talk. They cannot express their voice. They're scared because these are the rebels who are like, they have the jihadi josh. You understand what I'm saying? Somehow they have those kind of things. Like, when they attacked on different government establishment, even during that July, August in 2024, I was a minister, right? The Bangladesh television, the state television was under my ministry. And I know how all these jihadis came together and invaded into the establishment and, set on fire the entire television station, how they are doing it. The general people would not be doing that. The general people are the peace-loving people. So if they get a chance to vote peacefully, they will give their opinion and they'll give their mandate differently. I still believe that.
Well, I just hope that you're right because, Mr. Arafat, this is a matter of grave concern. Of course, viewers, thank you very much for speaking to me. Of course, viewers, it has become now quite the tradition to avert the eye, the gaze, so to speak, from Islamism and try and rationalize it. And this is problematic. It's also problematic for India in the subcontinent because we are sandwiched between two Muslim majority countries, but also for the globe, for the world. And we are seeing the outcome of this blindsiding from Sydney all the way to New York. And that's going to be the topic of my discussion with the next guest on this very show. Scholar at the University of Mississippi, author of The Parasitic Mind, How Infectious Ideas Are Killing Common Sense, and the forthcoming book, Suicidal Empathy, Dying to Be Kind, joins us now to answer a few, and I have to say this, viewers, blunt questions shorn totally of PR. And I'm going to begin by asking these questions. Mr. Saad, thank you very much. You've been praised by Prime Minister Modi for your admiration of India and its culture. In your view, what is the single biggest threat to India's future today? External aggression, internal decay, or ideological subversion?
I mean, I would probably say that the latter, in that I know that India has a very rich tapestry of cultures and languages and spices and foods, but I know that there's a problem that the entire globe is facing, and that's coming from an ideology that may not be consistent with some of the liberties and freedoms that we take for granted. So without knowing too much about the internal machinations of Indian politics,
Right.
I would say the same problem that the rest of the world faces is the one that India faces.
So clearly, you're referring to the elephant in the room, and I'm going to name it Islamism. You argue it's an ideology, not a reaction. Why do so many still insist it's merely a response to Hindu or Western assertion? And why is that, I would have to say and ask you, a dangerous lie?
Well, because we've evolved the prefrontal cortex here in the front of our brain in order to be able to invoke our capacity to reason. Part of our capacity to reason is to understand statistical regularities. So, for example, if there have been, this is a real statistic, which I am underestimating the actual number, there have been over 48,000 plus Islamic terror attacks nearly since 9/11 alone in nearly 70 countries. Surely we can't be arguing that each of those instances of 48,000 Islamic attacks are due to some boogeyman retaliation to something, right? Especially when the terrorists themselves will usually tell you exactly why they're doing it. And oftentimes they tell you very truthfully it is stemming from particular tenets of their faith. So yes, there might be a few instances where it is some form of retaliation, but generally speaking, Islam, this doesn't mean that most Muslims are not perfectly lovely and nice. I come from Lebanon. I've known more nice Muslims than most people will ever meet. But Islam divides the world into two camps. It's a dual system. There is Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam. Those are Arabic words which mean the house of Islam and the house of war. Any country that is not yet under the dominion of Islam is under officially the house of war. So that's the best explanation for what we're seeing around the world.
Well, India has repeatedly warned against naming the problem, and all of us are pulled up if we do. What happens to a democracy that refuses to identify the ideology challenging it?
Well, imagine if you go to see your physician, but you have a value system that says that your physician should never name the diagnosis of whatever it is that ails you. So it is more important to ignore the problem than to actually name it and hopefully address it, right? This is exactly why. So I have two books that are relevant to this. My 2020 book, The Parasitic Mind, explains what happens to human minds when they are parasitized by ideological capture. And then in my forthcoming book, Suicidal Empathy, I explain what happens to our emotional system when it is hijacked by parasitic impotence, right? So it becomes more important to not be labeled Islamophobic than to protect young children in Britain. As you probably know, the grooming gangs in Britain over the past 30 years have gone up and down Britain, raping thousands and thousands of British white girls, but the police thought in their twisted calculus that it would have been too Islamophobic and bigoted to actually name the problem. If a few children have to be raped, so be it. At least we are kind and tolerant.
Well, so political correctness is a problem. Okay, now you've said open societies are uniquely vulnerable. But I want to ask you, is this true that Islamism exploits free speech, secularism, and tolerance to weaken countries from within?
It's 100% true. The Muslim Brotherhood stood on top of the mountain and screamed it to the entire world to hear them. And yet, of course, we all refused to hear it. By the way, it's not just the Muslim Brotherhood who said this. They said, we are going to conquer the West. And I hope all of your Indian listeners pay close attention to this. We are going to conquer the West in three ways. We're going to conquer it through the womb of our women, right? So, for example, most Western countries right now have a fertility rate that's well below replacement rate. And so if you've got Muslims who are, procreating at a rate of 4 children a family versus, we're creating at 1.3%, 1.3 children per family, we can calculate what the demographic outlook looks like. It's not a difficult calculation to make. So that's number one, through the womb of our women. Number two, We will conquer the West through hijrah. Hijrah is the Arabic word for immigration. And how beautiful it is when the West has decided that an open door policy is the best way to exhibit that we are kind and compassionate. And number three, to your exact question, we are going to conquer the West by using your miserable freedoms against you. So they scream it loudly and we ignore it proudly.
Okay, so let me ask you, because there is this action-reaction theory that dominates academia and media. Where does this come from?
Well, it comes from an internalized set of values that suggest that it is gauche, it is inappropriate, it is offensive to ever criticize someone's religion. Good people don't do that, right? And so this is why, by the way, if you forgive me for saying this, in one of your earlier questions, you put a whole bunch of qualifiers: radical, extremist Islamism. There is no such thing. There's only Islam. Erdogan, the president of Turkey, stated that exactly. There is no radical Islam. There's no moderate Islam. There's just Islam. A million Islamic scholars have said that. Much of Islam is itself political. 90% plus of it is political Islam. And there's about 10% that's sort of the spiritual elements, right? So there is no something that is outside of Islam, but yet we don't feel comfortable saying that because it feels as though it's wrong to criticize it. Let me give an analogy. Badminton is a sport that starts with the letter B. Boxing is a sport that starts with the letter B. They're both sports, but they're not equally likely to inflict brain damage to you, correct? So by the same logic, all religions are not equally likely to function harmoniously within a system of secularism and personal liberties. The quicker we realize this, while being perfectly kind and tolerant and welcoming of individual Muslims, the better the world will be.
My final one, the denial of Islamist radicalism hurts, and that's my worry, Indian Muslims the most. Would you agree?
I do, of course. Look, the biggest victims of Islamic terror happen to be Muslims themselves, right? So this is why the idea, but it's only 1% that are committing the violence. That's a bit of a canard, because why aren't the rest of the beautiful, peaceful, kind Muslims standing up and saying, no more? It's been 1400 years of this. You're no longer going to do this in the name of my faith, or we're going to reform our faith. So I completely agree with you that if the Muslims were able to be fully liberated from the shackles, by the way, you could still be proud of an endless number of elements of Islamic heritage. There is beautiful Islamic poetry, and there is Islamic philosophy, there's Islamic architecture, right? I'm Jewish. Now, that doesn't mean that being Jewish means that I have to make sure to light the Shabbat candle at 421 exactly. I can ignore those elements and yet still be proud of my heritage. And so what I would implore Muslims to do is be proud of all of the elements that you should rightly be proud of, and maybe soften some of the elements in your religion that are inconsistent with our 21st century liberties.
Gatsar, thank you very much for speaking to us. Hopelessly over. We leave you, viewers.